And
Hey
that's how you
everybody.
save all that money on college.
Yeah, that's the secret to saving $100,000. I mean, easy. So, does anyone have questions on that?
We're here all night. We're thrilled to see you guys. Everybody's popping in. As you're getting in, we've got 114 people already, so that's incredible.
Oh, it's
Why
going
don't
up. It's
you?
going up.
Nice, I love it. Why don't you guys put in the chat what year your high school student will be graduating for us, so we have an idea of who we're talking to here. How many people in class of 25? Okay, see 126. Wow.
I can't read this fast.
Oh, we got a 2028 in there, I see.
Oh, I saw 27, but boy.
Uh-huh.
So I love
Close.
the early birds. This is great.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
All right. Good stuff. Good stuff.
Hey, while people are still in that chat, let's try the reaction one. Who wants to learn how to save money and not overpay for college? Give me a thumbs up.
There you go. I saw a hand go up. I see some hearts.
Yeah.
Love it. All
All
right.
right.
Has
All right.
has anybody already sent a kid to college?
Oh, that's a good one. Yes, Amanda did. Desiree.
Okay. All right.
All right.
Well,
You two
congratulations.
might be our pros that we're gonna ask questions on.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, there's a few more. Okay.
Okay. Wow, lots of people. Y'all are ahead of me. My daughter is 16 and we have just started a junior year and she is scheduling her first college visits and taking her ACT practice test tomorrow. She is not happy about that.
You should have told me, Chuck. I could help her with that.
You can help with that. Everybody should know right now, you have the best possible scenario with JP on this call. My man, not only does he have an epic beard, but his knowledge of college, all things college is also epic. So you're lucky you got him. And unlike him, I went to the University of Nebraska where the N stands for knowledge. So you're not as lucky with me.
Oh, that's a good one. Oh my gosh. And as someone who did my undergrad at Iowa State, I would agree with that assessment. But
Oh
but
man.
no, no. I love it.
Uh,
I love
Good
it.
stuff. Well, should we kick this thing off? It looks like we got 197 people. That is absolutely incredible.
I we just broke 200.
Wow. That's
All right.
fantastic.
Let's get started here. So I just, you know what, one more. One more. Is anybody been to a College Aid Pro webinar before?
Good job.
Is this new for everybody, or is there anybody that like? Okay, all right. For the most part, I think this is a lot of newbies. So let me just start sharing my screen here and kind of just do a quick brief intro about who we are and all that good stuff.
JP, I had one comment that said you're not too loud. I don't know if you have the ability to turn up your mic just a little bit, but otherwise you can just yell.
I'll just yell louder. I'll be like that guy on the TV that yells. No, I'm kidding. All right, sharing screen here. All right, Chuck, you want to do tell everybody a little bit about who College Aid Pro is?
So, sure. College Aid Pro, we are here to be advocates for parents and students, not universities, not the Department of Education. And our mission is to end the student debt crisis by, empowering families to shop smarter for college. When you guys walk away today, our one wish is that you are educated consumers and you have the knowledge you need to make educated decisions on how to pay less for college, how to fit it into your budget, and how to get into the schools you want. JP, anything to add on that? Anything I'm leaving out?
No, I think honestly you nailed it. I'll just say, and I'll use this as a transition to a little bit about us. I'll just say, you know, I've been doing this for 20 plus years, but I started off in the financial aid office at USC in Southern California, and that's kind of how I got into this arena. And I can legitimately tell you where I've met families where I was like, please don't come here because you will financially ruin yourself. This is just too expensive a school for your situation. And they were just gung ho saying, oh, this is my dream school, whatever. And I've been doing this long enough where now I still call them kids, but they're 35, they're 40, and I'm in touch with them on LinkedIn and Facebook and all that stuff, and I remember a student, what is a student who they sat in my desk, across my desk with her dad, and I was like, please don't come here, please don't come here. This is you're going to go into way too much debt. They didn't listen. 15 plus years later, I'm chatting with her on Facebook, and she's like, I'm like, how's it going? How's it going? And she goes, those college years were the best years of my life. And I was like, well, that's great. Glad to hear it. And she goes, no, 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 you don't understand. The rest of my life since then has been terrible. I've not been able to afford things. I've been, couch surfing. I had to move back home with mom and dad a couple different times. She goes, when I got married, my school debt almost divorced us. She goes, my life's been hell. And she's like, I remember that day you told me not to come. I wish I would have listened to you. And so I take that stuff to heart. And so that's kind of been always been my driving factor is like, I love college. I think it's a great time, a great experience, but we got to be smarter about how we're doing this. Back in my day when I went to college, it was affordable on a parent's living salary. That's not the case anymore. And so we got to be smart about that. So that's my that's my shtick, and I'll let Chuck kind of give a little background on him.
Yeah, so I don't have the same experience as JP. I'm actually a financial advisor in Houston, Texas. I've worked in financial services my entire career. But what got me into this is several years ago, my wife and I were foster parents and adopted a little boy out of Child Protective Services here in Houston. And in that process, I found out that kids coming out of CPS got tuition waivers in the state of Texas. And that got me interested. Hey, if I didn't know that, what else don't I know? And he's going to be 13 now. So I've been kind of studying this for 13 years and helping people in my financial planning practice. But to expand on what JP said and the anecdote and the story he gave, I've probably worked with, I don't know, close to 300 people who have had some form of student loans. And what I'll tell you right up front is I can't think of a single client or customer that's told me they regret where they went to college, but I can count an incredible number of people who tell me they regret how much they borrowed to go to college. So your experience is going to be good. It's going to be what you make of it. And let's take tonight to make sure you guys are making informed decisions and setting yourself up for success and good financial outcomes. So that's all I'd say. So where do we start? We are going to start with MyCap, the College Aid Pro software. I believe everybody in here has a subscription to it for at least a year, especially if you're a junior or senior. This software is an incredible resource for you. It's got guidance on how to complete the financial aid applications. It's got the SAI calculator. It's got access to private scholarships, scholarships at every school. If you put in your profile and complete your financial information, it'll give you a 1 year and 4 year cost of college and some insight into borrowing. And JP has just added the links to MyCap in the chat. So, we really encourage you to do that. I do see a couple hands raising, and I don't know if that means you guys have specific questions. We've got a lot to cover tonight, and I don't want to speak for JP, but if you do put them in the chat or the Q&A and we have a moment or it's relevant to what we're presenting, we'll try and answer them. If not, we'll see what happens. But, we just want to make this as much of a conversation as we can and not a presentation. JP, anything else, buddy?
No, yeah, just what you said. If you do have questions, throw in the Q&A. Honestly, it keeps it organized for me, my brain. I lose it. I get lost in the chat. So, yeah, anything you have questions, put it in the Q&A. We'll do our best to address anything. Obviously, just know that we can't give any specific advice. This is more general guidance. But we'll talk more about that at the end too.
Yep.
But
So
I'll let Chuck talk about the good old financial aid stuff here.
awesome. So 2 quick questions. What is SAI? stands for Student Aid Index, and we'll cover that in just a second. And second, how can we get a subscription for the software? I believe if you talk to your counselor at the school, they'll be able to point you in the right direction if there's a school discount or a free link. And if not, the link JP used will allow you to get connected. So moving on to what is financial aid? So schools use financial aid as a way to discount the sticker price to entice you to go there, right? I think the statistics I've seen are that most private schools are discounting tuition, somewhere in the 40 to 50% range these days. And there's basically three types of financial aid. So there's need-based grants. It's free money awarded based on students' financial profile. So the FAFSA is the federal version of this. It's the application you'll be completing. Merit-based scholarships are the ones I could never qualify with my knowledge. They are free money awarded based on your student's talent profile. So either you have great grades, you're in the band, you're in the debate club, you have something unique about you that schools want you to go there and will give you some money to attend. And then last is self-help. Loans and work study, it's not free money, but it can be a huge help. When I went to the University of Nebraska, I worked at the recreation center and swiped IDs. So I'd swipe an ID, I'd go back and read and do a little studying, swipe the next ID, keep studying, and was able to make it through. And it was very helpful, in that time. Yeah. And this is probably one of the simplest but best illustrations of discounts in action. And JP, feel free to chime in, but total estimated COA. COA is an acronym. It stands for cost of attendance. So that's everything that goes into attending school: tuition, room and board, books, supplies. You can see it broken out below. So you got two examples here: a public school that's about $35,000 and a private university that's about $77,000. The student aid index is the same for the family, which may or may not be accurate depending on which application the school makes you use. There could be some subtle differences. And what that comes out to is, what is your need? So the cost of attendance minus your SAI gives you the need. So you can see 34,554 minus 30,000 leaves you with $4,544 in need, or at the private university, 46,637. And the total need that the schools will give out, public schools have a lot more kids. They're not given as much academic scholarship. They're meeting financial aid through, grants, where private universities are giving merit scholarships, grants, work study. You can see the student loans that people are taking. And ultimately, after the cost of aid, you get down to what is your out-of-pocket cost? What's it truly going to cost you and not have to pay back to go there? And believe it or not, that close to $30,000 difference gets narrowed down to about 5,000 or 6. So, your actual aid offer, it can vary depending on your income, your assets, how good your grades or test scores are. But the reality is, private schools are not necessarily always significantly more expensive than publics. JP, anything you want to throw in there?
I have a comment, but I think it's more appropriate for the next slide. So
Perfect. Yeah. And yes, on this slide, the cost of attendance is per year. So right now, most public universities, so I live in Texas, Houston, Texas, to go to A&M, to go to UT, you're looking at about 32,000 or close to 120 to 130,000 for 4 years in college. And it really only goes up from there.
yeah, I mean, we know there are some schools whose sticker price is 99,000 per year.
Exactly.
It's going to cost more to go to college than it would to buy a house in some places.
All right. What do we got next? Here we go. Now, this is going to answer a couple of the questions we saw in the chat already. So cost of attendance is sticker price. It's what's advertised. If you go to any school's website or use Google and say, University of Nebraska, cost of attendance, University of Texas, cost of attendance, it will take you right to the page and it will break it out by all the different categories. So that's the sticker price. SAI, it used to be called EFC for some of you that have already sent your kiddos to college. It changed last year. So EFC stood for Expected Family Contribution. SAI stands for Student Aid Index. Again, they're interchangeable, synonymous, and it's what colleges and government think you can actually pay. And unfortunately, it's almost always way more than you feel like you can pay. It's typically for most families feels like a high number. And then cost of attendance minus the SAI or EFC equals your need. And this is the amount of aid you're potentially eligible to receive. And the reason potentially is underlined is because every school gives aid differently, right? It's going to depend on your unique family situation. And some schools may be more generous to you, and other schools may be less generous. So school selection makes a big difference.
And I just want to reference the previous slide now that you explained
Mhm.
that, and what to put that in action. Here's the sticker price, the cost of attendance. As Chuck said, almost 77,000. The SAI about 30. The need was 46. Just because they needed 46, they didn't get 46. They got 39. I mean, that's still pretty good, but so their true cost was more than their student aid index. Their true cost. So just know that you just because your student aid index is a certain number does not mean that's your actual cost for that school. It probably is going to be higher.
Exactly. Yep. And we're going to get to the two different applications, and we'll address some of the changes and differences. So just bear with us as we get there. But thank you for throwing that stuff in the chat. It really does give us a uh, things to think about. I see the question on 529s belonging to grandparents or others. We'll get to that in a little bit as well. All right. You want to hit the next slide for me?
And the only thing I'm going to add one
Oh,
extra thing on this one. Like I can nerd out on this one.
yeah.
This seems like a straightforward formula. This is actually a master's level course that takes a semester to teach. Just to give you context, that student aid index formula, if I print it out, it's 63 pages long.
Yeah, I've got it right here.
Yeah, the rules are hundreds and
Yeah,
hundreds and hundreds of pages long.
yeah.
This is a graduate level, master's level, semester course for those who make this their career. So we are kind of oversimplifying it, but this gives you a functional knowledge. But just understand, this is why the number one question I get, and I bet Chuck you get this question, it drives me not nuts, but I understand where it's coming from. Hey, is there a certain income that if we make that's just too much and we shouldn't even bother applying? Common question. Is that if you guys have ever thought that question, like give me a thumbs up or something. But the answer is no, there isn't some magic number. I can have a family of 4 who makes 150,000 a year and they get all the financial aid in the world, and I can have another family of 4 make 150,000 financial aid and get no financial aid. This is more complex than you realize, and it's also why, again, I know it's well intended, but parents usually give other parents terrible advice, especially in the Facebook groups. I'm a member of a lot of Facebook groups with parents who, again, are trying to help, but they're giving wrong advice. And so the truest source of what's going to be accurate for you is when you plug in your information into that MyCap software, because this is admittedly more complex than what.
Did I lose you? All right. So what should we know about RSAI? Um, what is considered an asset? Everything but your retirement accounts. So 401ks, IRAs, Roths, anything that is pre-tax money, if you think of that. And when you submit your applications, you're valuing the assets at the time you submit those financial aid forms. So there can be, depending on what goes on in the stock market, if you've got a big taxable investment account that's going to be counted and there's a drawdown in the stock market waiting, make sure you know the value and the impact of a change in the market. What other things are super important is the value of your house, real estate, parent assets for student assets is super important to know. In general, we would encourage you to keep as much assets out of your student's name as possible. We want to make sure that everybody knows that 529s are considered assets of the parent and that the student is typically the beneficiary. Grandparent 529 and sibling 529s no longer contribute, impact the the primary students who you're submitting the application for. UGMA and UTMA accounts do have a big impact, right? Those are going to be valued at almost 20%, where a parent asset's only going to be valued at 5. So there's lots of things that go into this. JP, it looks like you're about to chime in. I love it.
Uh, and the one thing, and again, I don't want to overly complicate it, but just understand there's different rules for different applications. So as Chuck was saying, like for FAFSA purposes, a grandparent 529, we don't need to report it now. That's great. If you have 2 kids and you had 2 529s, the siblings that's not applying to, we don't have to report that, right? Correct. That's true for FAFSA, not true for the CSS profile. And Chuck will talk, about, or I actually later I will
Yeah,
talk about those
you're going to talk
applications.
about that.
But just a heads up, different applications have different rules, so there's a lot of spinning plates in the air here.
Exactly. So a couple other things. If you're a business owner or farm owner, those values are now considered on the FAFSA, where previous years they were treated differently. If you had less than 100 employees, they might not have been counted. So those things are all relevant now. And in the software, there are areas where if you don't know what should be put in, you can click on a little information button. It will tell you, it'll kind of help you break it out. And just remember, when you're creating your profile, the data that comes out is only as good as the information that goes in. So make sure and be thoughtful about that. And when it comes to real estate, don't overvalue it. Make sure you're, looking at several sources, whether it's Zillow, whether it's the appraisal district that you're taxed from, whether it's the federal housing authority website. Make sure you're looking at all those options and choosing the lowest value, because the higher that is, the more it can impact you. And when it says, is one of the questions we see, is there a level of assets or owner owned that disqualify you or keep you from getting aid? There's not really a specific level. JP did a great job of explaining that, and it's more dependent on your situation, number of kids, your school list, all those different things. So don't get too focused in on that. Income is going to be the biggest driver of SAI. Assets have a slightly smaller impact. So things like that are going to be relevant, but as you put them into the software, we'll show you a little bit more later. It'll start to become more clear. We just talked about income. So prior year tax return. If you are going to be in the class of 2025, it will be using your 23 tax return. So hopefully you've already finished it. You might have been extended till October. And if you live in someplace like Houston, where you were hit by a derecho and a hurricane, you might not have to file all the way until February. But that being said, in terms of financial aid, and JP, feel free to chime in here, it's going to behoove you to finish that tax return before you apply for financial aid. It's going to be real important. I can't overstate that enough, especially with the new FAFSA. It's kind of an illusion of control, and you have to consent basically to let them get your tax return. And it just makes life a lot easier. So I would encourage you guys to make sure you get that 23 return done before we could say October for the CSS profile, and it looks like it's going to be December for the FAFSA. Your income is going to come from line 11 on your 1040. That's your adjusted gross income. Keep in mind, adjusted gross income is your income plus adjustments. So things like, student loan interest and different things. It's not all your itemized deductions. So just keep that in mind. And students, they get an income allowance of $9,400 a year. So they can work. And if they do make more than that, then it might start to impact their financial aid, but less, not so much. And is debt considered? No, not really. It's in simplest terms, I'd say don't think of it at all. If you want to get a little deeper, it could be relevant when it comes to your mortgage and home equity, but that's really about the only place, maybe in some appeals if you have medical debt. But JP, anything to throw in there, buddy?
Yeah, well, I'll just say that's another common question. Like, well, don't they take into consideration my expenses? And no, they don't. What they're going to do is say, what's the family size? Let's say family 4, family 3, family 5. What's the size of that family? And I'm it's not precise, but this will make the most sense. Basically, whatever the poverty guidelines are for that family size, that's how much they allocate for your expenses. So again, as Truck said, they're going to start with line 11, your AGI. Technically, they will subtract out line 22, taxes paid. Then they'll subtract out this extremely modest amount of money for poverty. That's basically poverty guidelines for your expenses. And the rest of that money, that's available to calculate your SAI. And that's the simplest way I would explain the SAI calculation from income perspective.
Yep. There's a question, parent-owned 529 accounts with kids as beneficiary counts in the calculation towards SAI. Yes, it does. It's going to be considered a non-retirement asset of the parent. All right.
All right. And do you want to, what, there's two people that asked the same question, basically, UGMA, UTMA, since you're the financial advisor.
Sure. So I missed that question, but UTMA is basically stands for Uniform Gift to Minors or Uniform Transfer to Minors. Typically, kids under the age of 18 can't have like brokerage accounts in their name without a guardian or uh, call it a guardian, sorry. And those are irrevocable gifts to the kids. So the money that goes into it has to be used for the benefit of the kid and can't be taken out later. So that would count as a child asset if you have a UGMA or UTMA account. So,
Yeah. And I would simply say, if you don't know what it is, you probably don't have it. So don't
yeah.
worry about it. And do you want to tackle this other one, unrealized gains, the stocks you own but didn't sell and don't pay taxes on, do they count against you in financial aid?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be the market value of your account, unfortunately, at the time you submit the application. So if you bought a stock at 10, if you bought Tesla at 10 and it went to 700 and you were lucky enough to do that, then yeah, it's going to impact the value of that account. That value of account, assuming it's taxable, not a retirement account, would be considered a parental asset. So yeah, it will go in.
All right. Let's shift gears from need based aid, the grant money, that bucket. I'm going to talk about a different bucket of free money, the other free money that we love, and that's merit money, scholarships, right? So, for the most part, scholarships, when they're coming from the schools, the universities, the colleges, 99% of the time, that is going to be coming from the admissions office. So, the when the student submits their amazing application about why they're such an amazing student, how they stand out, and why they pick me, the people that are making that decision say yes, we'll admit you. It's kind of that same committee that's saying, well, should we give them a scholarship to help again recruit them? But even with that said, because again, there's always that question. Well, I think we make too much. We shouldn't. I don't think we're even going to bother filling out a FAFSA. Even here's a weird little quirk about a couple schools in this country, some very popular schools in this country.
Mhm.
If you want to be considered for a merit scholarship, some schools will say you still need to fill out the financial aid applications. It doesn't make sense. I know, but a couple very popular schools in the country have these little quirks. So I I I have never. I mean, I have clients who make millions, literally, and I still make them fill out the financial aid. Well, I do it for them, but I have them do the financial aid every single year because there's just in case. All right.
Yeah, JP, can I chime in there? Just
Yeah.
working as a financial advisor, this happened to me last year. I had a family earning over $1 million a year in income, just earning in salary. They were also a high spending family. Dad unfortunately died in a car accident. Mom had no employable skills, uh, not no employable skills, but wasn't employed and wasn't able to go back to work immediately. And because of that, it made it much more difficult for them to get aid in the process than if they would have just followed JP's advice and done it up front. So I mean, it can impact anybody. So that's a real life example of something that's happened in the last year.
Great point. Um, Also, when it comes to the scholarships, schools can award it based upon different methodologies, right? Oftentimes, if it's coming from admissions, it's probably they're looking at, the GPA, the class rank, the high test scores, all that stuff. And I will just, I'm going to put on my admissions hat for a brief moment and just say, bear in mind that even if these schools are saying they're test optional, which is, I do a whole webinar about how test optional is really not test optional, more like test recommended. There are plenty of schools who also say for admissions they might be test optional, but oh, you wanted a scholarship, you need to submit the test score. So just know they, again, different schools have different rules. So you want to be aware of all the little quirks of all the little schools that you're considering applying to. But there are also scholarships that are awarded not because of their grades. There are non-academic scholarships. I think the most obvious one would be for athletes being recruited for, let's say, play football or something. Or maybe your child writes such an amazing essay that they leave such a profound impression on the admissions officer, and they're just like, we want that kid here. So it might not always be based upon the grades, but there are different strategies for those scholarships. And I always just tell my kids, do a good job of researching what colleges you want to attend, and then just make sure you're crafting that right admission strategy. That's going to be your best bet to help set yourself up to win maybe any of those scholarships from the schools. And then what if you're in a situation where you're like, maybe we don't qualify for need-based grant money? But then what if we don't qualify for scholarships? Then what do we do? At that point, my advice and strategy becomes looking at what I'm going to call value schools. Okay, we're going to basically look at schools that don't inflate their prices so ridiculously high. And I'm just going to say it. Where I worked for 18 years, USC, our price tag, our sticker price is around $97,000, I think, this year. Newsflash: it doesn't cost $97,000 to educate your child. That's all inflated, right? So that's the game that these schools play. Most schools play, but there are a plenty of good caliber schools that don't play that game. They just kind of charge, let's just call it a fair price. And so that's what I'm going to look for. Or depending on where you live, maybe like in California, there's a great program where the students can start at the community college and automatically guaranteed transfer to the UCs or the Cal States. That's another great way to save money. So I'm looking for the value options at that point. Or if you're in a situation where your child wants that like private school experience, but can't afford that private school price tag, then look for the public schools that offer a great honors program. Some of these schools have really strong honors programs where they give them like small classes, priority registration, maybe even special housing. Look for those options too. There's a lot of good options out there that don't necessarily have the $90,000+ price tag with them. That's all I will say about that. But with that, Chuck, do you want to take the controls and maybe just demonstrate a sample of the College A Pro? Like, again, let's just see live kind of how that works. Do you want to take over?
Absolutely. Right before I do that, though, there's one question that just came in. This is getting to be a pretty technical question, and I'm not going to address the whole thing. I'm going to give you kind of an overview. But basically, it says, what if your student lives at home but pays for their own room and board and is considered a dependent on their taxes? So, meaning somehow your child has become tax independent. Basically, we won't be able to claim them as a dependent on ours. Well, for financial aid purposes, as long as that student is 24 years old or younger, they're going to be basically a dependent student for financial aid purposes. In terms of tax purposes, I see where you're going, but you got to consult your CPA. But basically, your student has to be able to provide 50% of their own support. It's not just room and board. So if the cost of attendance of going to college is 90,000, I think the IRS is probably going to say they need to be providing at least 45,000 of their own support before they can be tax independent. So I think I understand what you're asking, but I would highly encourage you to consult a CPA on something like that.
Yeah,
All
and like
right.
you said, though, as far as financial aid goes, doesn't just because even if you can be tax independent for IRS, That does not make you independent for the Department of Ed.
Yep.
Financial aid is going to make parents submit their information too.
All right. Can you see my screen? All right.
I can see it. Anyone
Perfect.
else? Anyone else see it? Thumbs up, maybe. Just make sure.
All right, I like it. All right, so this is the dashboard for the College Aid Pro software. The most important thing is up here on the right hand, there's a profile. And there's your account info, your personal information, and your college budget. And you really have to complete this to make it useful. So I won't go through everything, but I want to reinforce how important good data in here is. You can see the kind of stuff it's asking. Where are you from? What's your GPA? What are your test scores? Financial information, earning, how old are your parents? What are their tax filing status? Stuff like that. It's really important that you provide correct and complete information. In terms of your college budget, it's going to ask if you have 529 savings plans, how much you're willing to contribute. Can you contribute out of cash flow? You know, things like this are really important to me as a financial advisor. And just 2 tips I'll tell you, think of everything when you're thinking of cash flow, right? My daughter has been in competitive dance and is a golfer. My son has played select baseball. Those are expenses that when they move to college will disappear in theory, and that's dollars that might be able to be contributed to college. So think about things, holistically as you're creating your budget. From there, now you've got your information in, and it's going to calculate an SAI for federal schools, which are the big public schools: Arizona State, Texas A&M, UT Austin, University of Arizona. Then it's going to calculate your institutional SAI, which is from the CSS profile for private schools. It's going to be schools like MIT. So you'll automatically get all those calculations. And then most importantly, it's going to tell you what a sticker price of a school is and what your likely net cost is. And I've been doing this long enough that the way I tell people how accurate this is, and JP, feel free to chime in, about 30% of my clients usually come in within a couple $100 of our estimate if they put in good information. 30% get a slightly better deal, and 30% get a slightly less deal based on our estimates. But it's all generally based on the quality of the information you put in. So it's very accurate. I'd say well over 85%. And then just to dive in a little bit more, so Austin College is a great school. It's up north of Dallas-Fort Worth. And in this case, what you can see is it's projected that in this case, I would get a need-based grant of $32,000 or a merit scholarship of $28,000. I used to articulate this in a way that I would say you typically get the greater of either, but not both. But realistically, it's going to be the greater number, but it can be split between grants and scholarships. Does that make sense, JP? Am I saying that in a way that makes sense to everybody?
That makes sense to me. What I always say is don't get lost in the weeds, focus on the net cost. Like
Yep,
how we got
exactly.
there, whether it was grants or scholarships, I don't care. It's free money. Focus on the net cost.
That's a great point. And all your questions are good in terms of what goes into SAI, but the reality is you don't have much control over the inputs too much. So just put in the best information and trust the software. As you put in the information and you put in your budget, it'll begin to tell you if it's affordable. And then as you go on, it will ultimately, you can put in your student, your financial aid award letters. And then it will tell you your remaining cost after that, and actually tell you if you got a good deal or not. So it's really holistic and comprehensive software. It can be super helpful in your process. And yes, so I'll show you on this one. It's asking, will it show different grants and scholarships that are available? So if you scroll down under there's 3 important parts, but admissions are important. And I'll let JP chime in here, but it's listing the GPA and the test score ranges. So just to give you an idea, this is the middle 50% of incoming freshman class test scores. So in general, if your scores are higher than that, that means you're in the top 25%. If you're in between this range, you're in the middle 50, and if you're below the low number, you're in the bottom 25. I don't have the same expertise in terms of admissions as JP, But as a general rule, if you're in the top 25%, I think it's going to make a lot of sense to submit those test scores. Um, then from there, you can, oops, sorry about that. Click on financial aid. You can see how they calculate their SAI, what need they give. And as you scroll down, you'll see all the scholarships, and the software will automatically tell you which one you think you will qualify for. So for just about every school in the system, it's got just about every scholarship available. So it's very comprehensive. And with that, I'll kind of get out of it. It's not meant to be a full demonstration of the software, as opposed to give you an idea of what you can accomplish and how it can help you in your college process. And like JP said, the thing you want to focus on is this net number at the bottom. That's the most important thing.
And then I'm just going to add, because a lot of people, not a lot, a couple of people ask, and this is a great question. I'm glad people ask this. Is your information private when you put this information in there? And absolutely it is. I will just share a little ditty. I'll try not to take too long, but over the years, I've been wooed by various tech companies. They're like, oh, look at what we did created and blah, 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 blah. And whenever I meet with the CEOs and such, and I would ask, like, what's their business model? A lot of companies out there, it was selling your private information. And I refused to ever participate. So merely by the time I came across College A Pro, um, and I had a chip on my shoulder, to be perfectly honest. And when I chatted with the CEO, I told him, I was like, I don't like anything. I don't like tech companies. This is what they do. And the CEO was very candid. He goes, we don't like tech companies to do that either. That's not our business model. We don't sell your private information. That's the only reason I'm aligned myself with College A Pro is they genuinely are trying to help families do this better, right? And they're not taking shortcuts. They're not selling your information. So yes, your information is secure, if you will.
And it's captive to the software. It doesn't go anywhere else.
Correct.
And then I noticed one question: do your net costs assume loans? No, they do not. That is your net cost after money you will never have to pay back. From there, you would calculate what you would need to borrow based on your budget, and the loans. So net cost does not have loans included in it.
All right. So now let's just talk about a quick overview of how do we apply for financial aid. And we kind of said some of these buzzwords earlier. So let's just understand first. I've kind of alluded to this. Every school has its own little quirks, its own little rules, whatever. But one thing that you can count on is every school is going to ask you to fill out a FAFSA. You know, if it's the federal application, it's what's needed to be eligible for any sort of federal, I'll call federal funding, whether it's loans, work study grants, anything, right? Every school is going to ask you to do the FAFSA, and there are going to be some schools that ask for some additional stuff, but we'll stick with the FAFSA for the moment. And every school, God bless them, they have different rules, they have different deadlines, so you really need to pay attention. I recommend like a spreadsheet. Here's the schools we're applying to. What's the application deadline? And what's the financial aid deadline? All right, just keep it on a spreadsheet. Keep it all straight. It's ultimately technically the student's journey. It's the student who's going to college. It's technically the student's applications, even though your mom and dad, you're putting your financial stuff on there. So it is technically, from a school's perspective, the responsibility of the student to have all of this done. And most schools are not going to be very proactive at communicating to you, mom and dad. They're going to probably send maybe like an email to the student, or they're going to say, hey, after you applied, create a student portal with the school. And it's on the student to check their student portal regularly for updates. And so I'm getting ahead of myself, but just know that the ownership is really put on the student to be aware of what needs to be done and by when. Now, let's just kind of get in the FAFSA. And I saw Chuck put it in the chat earlier, the link to the FAFSA website. There's in the past been scam websites, so I always say look for the .gov to know that you're there. The simplest thing you can do is FAFSA.gov, and it will forward you appropriately to this, what we're showing you is studentaid.gov. But again, for those of you who are class of 2025, uh, the FAFSA, if you heard in the news last year, it was kind of a mess. It's not all worked out just yet. And so for you, class of 2025, they're telling us they hope it will be live, December 1. So cross fingers, let's hope it does. Remember, it's using prior income, so they're looking at your 2023 tax return. That information is just going to get imported in. The student is going to need to create what's called an FSA, a federal student aid, an FSA ID, and at least the custodial parent, or if you're married, one of the parents will need to create an FSA ID as well. And the simplest way I would describe it is, when the FAFSA does open up live, the student's going to log in, put in their information, put in the schools. They will invite the parent then to fill in the financials. And when the parent gets that invite, you fill in your part. You use that FSA ID to log in and e-sign it. But that's the simplest way I can explain the process for you. But just also, like I said, if the parents, I kind of mentioned this, if the parents are married, it doesn't matter which one. If parents are divorced or separated, legally separated, the custodial parent is the one that's going to sign this or fill out the part of the FAFSA. The definition of custodial parent changed. I don't think, Chuck, did you mention this? I don't remember. But
I did not.
Okay, so the custodial parent is defined as the parent who financially contributed the most in the recent 12 months leading up to the application. So it's no longer where does the student live, or live the most. It is which parent financially contributed the most. That will be the custodial parent. So if you're in that situation where you're divorced or separated, maybe you have an opportunity to be strategic. Wink, wink. Talk to us if we want to know more. All right, let's move on to the CSS profile.
I'm going to chime in with one thing right there. On the FAFSA, there are some questions about non-U.S. citizens and permanent residents. Unfortunately, you have to be a U.S. citizen to qualify for federal financial aid. The alternative is going to the schools that offer institutional aid. And there are a lot of them out there, but for the FAFSA, you do need to be a U.S. citizen. In Texas, we have something called the TAFSA that helps a little bit. It's not quite the same. Oh, there's a typo in there. I apologize. TAFSA, not tags. But there's a little bit of aid you can get from there in certain cases. So you might want to look into that. But yeah, that was the last thing I wanted to chime in with there. Student has to be a U.S. citizen.
Yeah, great point. Great point. All right, let's get this advanced. Okay, so again, every school is going to ask you to do that FAFSA. There are about 250 schools in the country that are going to also ask you to do a CSS profile. This is on top of the FAFSA, not in lieu of the FAFSA, but on top of the FAFSA. And the simplest way I describe the CSS profile is a FAFSA on steroids. It's much more invasive. It's much more it's more intense, to be perfectly honest. Simplest way I'll explain it this way. When I do a FAFSA, and I've been doing them for 2 decades, I can do a FAFSA in 10 minutes. I can bang it out no problem, right? A CSS profile will take me probably 45 minutes. And if the parents want to sit there with me on it, then it's going to take 2.5 hours. So I don't like the parents to sit there with me because I just want to bang it out in 45. But it is much more intense, if you will. Again, about 250 schools use it. Some of the differences, they're going to ask about your home. They're going to ask about your primary home equity, whereas the FAFSA did not. If we are in a situation where parents are divorced or legally separated, they're going to ask about both parents. Okay, they're going to ask for, it doesn't matter, they're going to ask for mom and dad, right? And here's the kicker. If you both remarried, you now have 4 spouses, 4 parents, basically, financial information getting dumped into calculating that SAI. So again, more invasive, more intense. Definitely going to ask a lot more questions about your business if you own a business. it's even though technologically wise the platform works really well, it's just a lot more to it. So be very mindful, um, and prepare yourself if you have to do a CSS profile. Oh, and as far as the credentials, login credentials, has anyone heard of College Board? Like, has your child done an SAT or an AP? Give me thumbs up. Has any heard of that? College Board, that nonprofit organization that houses the APs, houses the SAT, they house the CSS profile as well. So your students probably already has a login and a password. You just log in and just to College Board basically, and you can find the CSS profile there. And I just because this matters, this ties into financial aid, but when you apply for admissions, there's, again, I'm oversimplifying it, but there's essentially three kinds of deadlines: early decision, early action, and regular decision, right? And just in case you don't know the basic differences, for all intent and purposes, think of early decision as the binding. Like, I'm going to apply early, and if you accept me, I promise I'm coming here. I'm oversimplifying it, but that's basically what you're doing, right? and and you can only apply to one school that way. It requires the school counselor sign off on and on all this stuff, but there's early decision. And is there evidence to suggest that helps your chances with admissions? For most schools, yeah, that usually does. The risk you take, you probably lose leverage when it comes to negotiating for financial aid because it's done so early, and you're committed that you probably don't have other award letters. There's an chances that you might not have award letters to compare and try to negotiate with, so you might lose some leverage. So just, there's a trade-off, and so if you're going to do that, this is where I say do your research. Have solid projections of what that school is going to cost you in, like, College Aid Pro. Use the MyCap software. Can you afford it? If not, I probably wouldn't apply early decision, right? Otherwise, look to early action. Early action is still applying early, but it's not binding. You're not committed, and you can apply to multiple schools early action, and that way you still have that chance to negotiate. And you. So and there's still a lot of statistical evidence to suggest early action also helps improve your admissions chances versus the regular decision. Regular decision's the good old fashioned application deadline that, like, I grew up to. And and I'll be honest, I almost never have anyone apply regular decision unless that's all that's offered. Like at the UCs and Cal States, I pretty much have all my kids apply early action. And if there is one standout school where it made sense to do early decision, maybe we'll do it. But just understand what you potentially lose or give up when you apply early decision. All right. The final point I probably want to make is, when it comes back to financial aid, is understand that when you get that financial aid award letter, that is not necessarily the end all be all. That is not necessarily their best offer. That is not necessarily the only thing they're going to be willing to give you. Be prepared, do your research, but be prepared to negotiate. Figure out, like, can you appeal and should you appeal? Chuck, do you want to give an example of maybe when it would make sense to appeal?
Yeah, so I think the important part of this is to have a narrative and some color to your story. And if you lost your income because of a layoff and you've been out of work for 6 months, 10 months, that would be something that would be very, very meaningful. If you have an incredible burden of medical bills, that would be something that's meaningful, right? There's different things that you would consider, but if there's any change, in simplest terms, significant change from the time you submitted the information to the time you get your award letter, it might be valuable to bring it up. Now, one thing I do want to clarify and add there, this is just one tip on the application process. If you were laid off, you don't necessarily want to put that into the details of the application. You want to save that until you get your award letter, because they can't, as Matt Carpenter, the founder of CAP, likes to say, they can't unsee what they've already seen, right? So if you fill in all your information, you show that you had a $200,000 salary, but you got laid off and you type that in at the end, they're just going to say, oh, that's too bad he got laid off, but he made 200,000 last year. It's very likely his next job is going to make 200,000. But if you wait and get your award, then you have the ability to say, hey, this is something you didn't know about. This is something you didn't consider in your process, and it may make a difference. So, anything to add on that, JP?
Yeah, I'll illustrate that point too. Is the and Chuck's talking about is at the end of a CSS profile is like, is there any special circumstances you want to tell us? My answer is always no. Keep my cards held to my chest, if you will, because the if you said, like in this example, your salary went from 200 to like nothing, you get that award letter and you're like, hey, so I wanted to talk about, like, did you take into consideration that I lost my job? If they say yes, you don't really know, and you don't know to how much they took it into consideration. They're not gonna, I guarantee they will not tell you what your financial aid would have looked like had you not said it. So I want a base to start from. And so I want to know, not tell them anything, get my base award letter, then we start the negotiation. Then I tell them the information, because then I can see the incremental progress of my appeals. Sometimes I might have 3 appeals. I'm going to do them one at a time. That's another conversation. But and I can't stress enough how someone who sat in the financial aid office who would have families across my desk trying to appeal for more money, or I was reading letters for more money. I can't tell you how much more meaningful it is when the student leads the charge. Now, I'm not saying the student needs to talk about your mom and dad's lost jobs and the details of it. I don't expect to know that. But I expect them to lead the charge and initiate the appeal and say, I want to come to the school so bad. It's my dream school because of XYZ. My parents lost their job. Here's an addendum. Here's my parents' story. And then cue the attachment from mom and dad. But I can't tell you how much more meaningful that was, much more I wanted to help when the student led the charge.
Somebody, one of my mentors once told me, if you do something nice for me, I'll appreciate it. But if you do something nice for my kid, I'll never forget. And that kind of goes to what JP's saying. When the student's leading the charge, it's very meaningful. Yeah, so we're really short on time. We're down to about 3 minutes. I want to chime in with one last thing. I don't know if the slides are available. I
I can answer.
apologize.
They will email you a link to the recording.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
And then in terms of the links we've put into the chat, I have to apologize. Initially, I was only sending it to JP apparently, and he already knows it all. So I went back and re-put anything in. But when we hang up this Zoom, those links are essentially gone except for the recording. So if you want them, copy them into a Word document or something for things like the CSS profile, the FAFSA application, different things like that. So we'll give you a few minutes to get that knocked out before we end it. Sorry, go ahead, JP.
Yeah, and here's a couple things I'm going to say. Mom and dad, give me a thumbs up. Are you busy? Are you busy with work? Busy with life? Busy as parents? Yeah, thumbs up. Are we all busy? I would imagine. I get it. We're all, we're all parents. We understand. We know where you're at. Here's what I don't want you to do. And this is, I want you to be different from everybody else. Don't take all this useful information and then just go, oh, that was great. And then put it like in a file and then forget about it. You know the saying, and again, I worked in higher education for so many years. There was always these mottos and logos, the saying, knowledge is power. Absolutely not true. Knowledge is not power. Applied knowledge is power. Okay. What do I mean? Take this information, run with it, act. Okay. We've oversimplified it. This is, again, way more complex than we're probably making it sound. Don't do this blind. Okay. Put at minimum, use the software. I mean, if you're the DIY type, like, I'm going to use the analogy taxes. No one really does taxes by themselves. No one goes and looks up the IRS code and goes, "Oh, this is," and fills out a blank tax return. If you do, God bless you. I don't. I'll call you a liar though.
Mhm.
We might DIY it and use a software, TurboTax or H&R Block, whatever. That's fine. Use, if that's you and you feel your situation's simple enough, use the MadCap software as the DIY tool. But if you want better results, what do? You go to a CPA, right? Ask a CPA to look at it. That's kind of what we try to help with. So if you think you have a situation, and I'll say like business owners, you need a professional to look at your situation. Divorced parents or legally separated parents, you want a professional looking at your situation, give you guidance on to make sure you do this right. So if you are in a situation where you think you realize you don't know it all and you want some help, I'm going to encourage you to just book a consult. We can give you, and I just put the link in the chat, but we can give you an idea of where you should be looking. Like, are you on the right track? I had a consult with a family today. I said, "You're doing everything perfect. Everything is right. You're on it. You know, just keep." And then if you have a question later, you can book an hour with me later. But if you want to just have a consult to make sure you're on the right track, you have questions, there's the link. Just grab a 20-minute call with us. We're happy to help guide you and make sure you're, like I said, you're on the right path. If we see something wrong or got some advice, we'll help you, right? But we really are just generally trying to make sure people, every family just does this smarter than the past generation. Okay. um Chuck, what else do you want to, anything else you want to add?
No, I could not articulate it as well as you did. Informed consumers. And if you are in the software and you ever need help, there's a talk to an expert button up there. Can you see my screen, everybody? Hit me with a thumbs up if you can. But the talk to the expert button's up there in the right-hand corner. It's available for you should you need it. That was the last thing I was going to add. And just say thanks to JP for doing such a great job. You're amazing, and I learn from you every time we're on here.
You're the man yourself. Don't cut yourself short.
All right.
All right,
Well,
y'all. Have
we're
a wonderful night. It's been great talking to y'all. Look forward to meeting you again sometime.